The next panel is a bit more technical and explores what you need to consider at the application level, types of code, types of data, what options are available, and where you want to go when choosing your path.
Well, as much as we could, since, that's a very big topic. So big, in fact, that we have 5 people on this panel. Let's just dive right in.
Hi, and welcome to our technical panel today. Should I stay or should I go? So you've already heard a lot about modernizing the mainframe and why it's important, but right now we really want to talk a lot about the technical details. And today I'm joined with a very large and amazing panel of professionals, experts in this topic. So let me quickly introduce them. We have Richard Baird from Kyndryl. We have Richard Gamblin from Microsoft. We have Avuday Gomatinayagam from Google Cloud, Graham Owen from OpenText, and Vince Rhee from VirtualZ Computing. You could not get a more diverse but deeply set of expertise in mainframe modernization and cloud than this panel today. I'm so excited. Welcome to all of you. All right, so I know we have a lot to talk about, so let's just dive right in if you don't mind. Let's start with, from a technical point of view, why is mainframe modernization finally getting a lot of attention? We've been screaming about this for years, but now I'm seeing stuff in the press and mainstream press. So why now? Avuday, why don't you kick us off on this one?
Yeah, thank you, Misty. So why now? It's the need for the digital agility, which is the need of the hour. And we see a lot of emerging techs and new fintechs in the market who are very efficient in the business and at a very low cost. So their operational cost is also very less, and they are being very efficient. And the large organizations on the other side are facing this pressure now from the increasing cost with their legacy systems like mainframes, and a pressure on the other side, which is a pressure to innovate and compete with these emerging players. So the need for digital agility is creating this new pressure that everyone has to modernize and catch up with the emerging players as well.
That's a very interesting point. There's that, I guess, that peer pressure, right? For lack of a better word, is you're seeing what the other people are doing and you need to keep up with it. Richard Baird, I want to toss this one to you as well, because Kyndryl is a systems integrator, so you get asked, a lot of times advice of what's the best way to go. Why do you think that this topic is heating up?
Well, Misty, I think what we're seeing in the marketplace, a few years ago, there was the move to move everything off, and that was how modernization was viewed. And, there's now a settling back more to sort of a steady state in the middle, where customers are seeing that the mainframe plays a role in their hybrid cloud with whichever hyperscaler or private cloud they're using. And so the need to integrate the mainframe as part of a full hybrid cloud solution that's going to be there for the long term, maybe not running all the stuff that it has done previously, but still a core part of a hybrid cloud environment, is what's driving customers to actually turn around and say, look, we need to modernize the mainframe. They didn't touch it for a long time because they thought, no, it's just going to sit there, we're going to move everything. Now they're sort of cycling back and saying, well, some's going to stay, some's going to go. And as a result, they need to modernize what's going to stay. And so that's what's driving the conversation here.
Well, you know what? I'm really glad you brought this topic of hybrid cloud up, Richard, because what I'm hearing from especially this very diverse panel is different perspectives of what modernization really entails. What is it you're actually doing? And hybrid cloud and keeping some applications on the mainframe and moving some off to the cloud is certainly one of those paths. But I'd like to give each of you a chance to describe what you are seeing actual customers doing in this space of modernization, and give our audience just kind of a sense of the range of opportunities, the range of things that could be done. And Richard Gamblin, how about if we start with you? Give us an example of something that somebody's actually doing in this space.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Misty. So from a Microsoft perspective, we're seeing massive diversity all the way through from people for who, they continue to see those mainframe applications and the platform as strategic, all the way through to others who are completely exiting their entire data center and moving all aspects of those footprints into cloud. I think probably one of the most interesting cases that I'm involved in at the moment is one of our tier one financial services clients. And they are taking a very nuanced view of this. And so for them, they're looking at their core applications. And some of them they are creating from scratch in cloud. They're moving to SaaS-based services because that has become a commoditized capability for them. So they're moving some of those applications in that way. Others are being refactored and decomponentized from monolithic applications to cloud-native microservices. And within the same organization, they are retaining a core of their mainframe because they see that's the right way to go. But they're accelerating that with us at the moment to drive through DevOps practices to accelerate the way that applications are being delivered on the platform. So they have decided to best exploit all of the different platforms and all of the different technologies available to them at the moment.
That's a really great example. So if I can just paraphrase for a second, your example highlights that it isn't one choice, right? It's a range of options, and you might have many choices within the same organization. That's a fantastic point. Now, Graham, you have a really great case study, a great example that we should explore. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to be on a different planet, I think, not to have noticed Santander talking about their Gravity project and the benefits they're seeing from actually moving their legacy mainframe applications into Linux environments using our enterprise server product. And what's really interesting is the way they've gone about it is that they've actually taken each country in turn, and they have multiple different applications which they developed over time. They've invested a lot of money in developing those applications to be fit for their business purpose. But now what they're looking to do is take those applications into the future and provide a new range of services. And they've chosen to use our platform to do that. And it's been quite an exciting project. And it's interesting to see how they approach that in different global areas, because different countries have different expectations and the systems are different. So they're very committed to getting off the mainframe because that's what they believe is going to help them drive their business.
I love this story, Graham, because it really highlights what we already just touched on briefly at the beginning of this session, and that is the why now. Because I think projects used to be a lot an all or none kind of attitude. And what Santander is really proving is that a phased approach or even customized by country approach is possible now, and certainly much more achievable. Let me toss it to Vince so we can bring Vince into this conversation. Tell us a customer example of what is it you're seeing people actually doing.
Yeah, no, first of all, I think I would agree with really all of the comments that are talking about diversity. I mean, that seems to be the most consistent thing. Everybody has a different approach, and even within an organization, we see different applications being treated in different ways. And, there are many drivers of this. I mean, I don't know, skills might be an issue. You may be running out of mainframe skills and looking to leverage something, elsewhere. The way we look at it is one of the really key underlying problems is all about not so much the application. There are a lot of good solutions there. As folks have mentioned, there's everything from refactoring applications, going to SaaS solutions, migrating applications intact. I mean, there are many solutions there. The issue that we hear a lot is all about the data I might move my application around, but unless I can also understand the dependencies between different applications and the data and all of that, it gets to be a very complicated problem to solve. So, we definitely, and again, there's a lot of diversity there. Different customers will do different things for different reasons. But, we believe that the easier we can make it to kind of unlock all of that data that's on the application, the easier it is to do what you want to do with the applications.
That's really amazing. So, and this actually does bring us to a super important point that I'm hoping to get out of this group, and that is the technical difficulties. I think that's a big part of why people haven't modernized or integrated in the past, is because of those technical barriers. So let's explore some of those. And Vince, you already touched us a little bit on the data being a technical barrier. Could you expand just a little bit more on what was the issue in the past and how are we able to address it now?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the issue is just simply the complexity of what you find in most mainframe sites. I mean, typically applications don't exist in isolation. You may have dozens of different applications. They share data. They reference the same files and databases. So to kind of break one out of that so that you can migrate it to a different platform gets to feel very risky. We've heard a lot of horror stories from customers that have gone down this path without really understanding that piece of it, and they've found all sorts of surprises as they go through that. There are issues of data integrity, there are issues of security, there are issues of ongoing management of that data. And honestly, that's what led us to our approach, which is all about providing simple, straightforward access to mainframe data, no matter where your application is. You don't get into these complicated, to move A, I've also got to think about moving B through J. Move A and leave the data where it is and access it just as you always have. That's been a compelling story for us. And anything we can do to give that sense that the move to another platform can be less risky, can be done without understanding all of these dependencies all of the time. I mean, that definitely encourages customers to take that step without as much fear and doubt over the whole process. And I think that's a really important issue today. The more we can show examples where I had this one application that I could pick up in isolation. I don't have to rethink everything else that shares data with it. I can put it on the platform I want. I mean, that's a great story. And that's something that a lot of the folks we speak to are very excited about today.
That's a really great point, Vince, and connecting your mainframe applications to your cloud services is an amazing capability that you have to offer. But you touched on something, and it's fear, right? And I wanted to go back to Avidai and Google, because you have a brand new service that really does help address that fear component. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Definitely, Misty. So, as you said, the fear or the risk, right? That's one of the key inhibitor that we see the customers from taking that first step and getting into the modernization journey or into the migration, because the fear is, again, it has multiple impacts. It's not just on the financial impact. It's also time lost during that period. In Google Cloud, we definitely focus on solutions that help our customers to mitigate the migration risk when they migrate the workloads to Google Cloud. And recently, we also had this dual run, which focuses primarily on mitigating the migration risk and helping the customers to help migrate with minimal risk and mitigating the risk that's possible.
Yeah, dual run is, for me, just a really interesting approach in that you're running the application both on the mainframe and in Google Cloud, and you're able to verify that the results are the same on both until you're comfortable moving completely over. It's really a very interesting approach. Now, Richard, I know that Kyndryl has their own approach to managing the risk of modernizing mainframe applications. Can you take us through a few of those?
So in Kyndryl, we have an approach that says, the right workload on the right platform. And so we take a workload by workload approach to looking at what should actually happen to it, and not only the application, but the data as well. And to the earlier point, you actually find some interesting things when you go through and actually look at the application, because in many instances, while the customer may think they know everything about the app, they don't. I mean, an interesting case I had last week, customer who said, yep, we're all good, we're ready to go, we can migrate it. Customer comes back and says, what's this APPC converse thing mean in my COBOL application? And I said, well, you haven't converted from SNA from many years ago. And they said, but we converted many years ago. All they've done is convert the network layer, not fix the application. So taking an application by application view is one of the key things that Kyndryl does. We have an approach that says you can modernize on. So you modernize the application on the mainframe. You can move it off together with the data or leave the data behind. Or you do an integrate with, as I said earlier, which is to do the hybrid approach and actually integrate the applications from the mainframe with those in your public cloud environment. And it's all of those pieces. There's no one size fits all, but a standard methodology that's backed by real sort of business need. But what's the business rationale for doing some of these things, or what are the business rationales for doing these things? Really need to be the thing that drives what happens from a technical standpoint as much as anything else.
I think that's really key right there, is that, it's not one size fits all, that you really need to work with a company that has experience in a lot of different areas to help sift through all of those little bits and bytes, right? And Graham, I'm not going to comment on how many years you've been doing this, but certainly you have quite a bit of experience in all of those little bits and bytes. Can you talk a little bit about how you approach handling the risk and helping them become comfortable with whatever their modernization strategy is?
Yeah, sure. Of course, I spent more than 30 years on the other side, so working on the IBM mainframe, and the last 8 really focused on helping customers who want to move. And how do we manage the risk? Well, I think the tough thing is really getting the customer to understand what the real risk is and what it isn't. Too often the first time we walk into a room and you say, how do you need the system to operate? What's the availability? How does it need to be secured? The simple answer is like the mainframe, and too often that means we don't really understand. But you mitigate the risk by getting a deep understanding of what the application is, what it does, how it delivers to the business, how it needs to be operated and supported, how it needs to be secured, how the data needs to be protected, and actually just laying that out and then mapping those requirements onto the technology appropriately. Unfortunately, it's just one of those topics that many people haven't truly explored. They see it as a simple platform switch, but what it is really is, how do I create a safe environment for my data and my applications to run those and deliver the services to the business? And you just have to understand the risk at the business level.
All right, Graham. I'm going to have to push back on you just a little bit because you said, oh, you just have to go through and understand what your application is. And we know that the people that created this environment, that created those applications, are probably no longer in the organization. So talk us through, how do you do that? How?
So we have some analysis tools, and what you've really got to do is use tooling and expertise to understand just what was going through the minds of some of the people when they were writing some of this code. We're working on one project at the moment which has a heavy assembler component, and everyone says, why on earth did they do this? They, for example, chose to use different register regulations to the standard ones, but somehow you've got to get back inside the mindset of the people who are developing this code. And that requires tools, that requires expertise, and a lot of hard work. But you're right. I mean, for many customers, the people who actually develop some of these core applications and some of this critical code that runs, they're no longer in that organization. So the subject matter experts know how to support the product, but they don't understand the intricacies of how that was developed.
That's a great point. It really does come down to, there's not a magic tool and there's not a magic company that's going to solve all of it. Often it's a partnership. Mm-hmm. And I know that OpenText has been doing mainframe modernization for decades, and often our partner has been Microsoft. So I'm going to come back to you, Richard Camplin, to talk about some of the things that Microsoft does to help with managing this risk and helping customers actually move forward.
So a big piece of the work that we do is, as you say, in our partnerships, in our ecosystem of the systems integrators like Kyndryl, like the software providers such as OpenText. But it's actually how we start to engineer those solutions under the covers. So clearly what you want is a functionally identical service that's being delivered from really what are the most trusted applications and data services to an organization. So it's really about drilling down into the engineering to make sure that all of the non-functional requirements are met, all of the scale, agility. There's a huge amount in here around protecting the data that we talked about earlier. So making sure that everything is regulatory compliant, where it's appropriate, data sovereignty. So the local laws are being applied on that data within the region is absolutely critical. So we do a huge amount of that engineering work to make sure that we have the same kinds of experiences for those services that companies place their trust in. I think the other aspect that we also explore is, well, what is the implication of continuing in your steady state? We've talked before about some of the drivers for change and some of the digital upstarts who are changing in the industry. But I think the other aspect is you go through these discussions, and I regularly have them with companies where they say, actually, we're satisfied with the work that we're doing and we're going to keep things steady state. And I said, okay, well, what happens in 10 years' time? Will you still have the steady state environment? And so we often flip the risk and the concern the other way. So what is the risk of doing nothing? And that can often stimulate a lot more interesting kinds of discussions, because you start to think about, well, actually, from a geographical perspective, this is going to change. From a business perspective, we want to be able to do things which we're simply unable to do now. And I think something that's cropped up a couple of times so far in this discussion is around skills. We'll say, well, if you do nothing, the feedback is often, well, my team that's there today supporting this environment will no longer be there. So you need to do something. And that's often a trigger for these discussions.
Well, you're kind of starting a checklist there of things that we need to consider when determining the path forward. So I'm tell me if I got any of these wrong, but I heard skills, what the application needs to do today and in the future, right? There was others that you said, and I'm missing them all. What else was I'm trying to make a checklist, nice and easy. Richard, which ones am I missing?
I'd say definitely functional and non-functional requirements. So delivering the same qualities of service as well as the functional similarities, identicalness.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have something that we should add to our checklist? Vince, what do we need to add to our checklist of things that people should consider?
Yeah, I mean, that concept of non-functional requirements is a really important one. I mean, it's not just I need the output to be the same. It's, if a problem occurs, can I diagnose it? Can I fix it? Can I react to it? Can I implement change in an orderly way? All of these other things, certainly security and auditing and regulatory compliance. I mean, certainly those are, very large considerations. And I think something that we've certainly seen from time to time is that when the customer thinks through all of these things and he takes a step back, there is absolutely a tendency to be overwhelmed by all of that. And that's why it's so important that, all of the folks on the call today bring that level of expertise to be able to help the customer better understand that and make some, really good choices there. Without that, it's really tough. And again, our approach where we can is often to break it up into little bite-sized pieces. You don't necessarily have to worry about, for instance, data security. Leave your data where it is. It's protected by your existing policies and so forth. So that's at least one piece of the puzzle. You don't have to unravel, at least not today. You can unravel that some other place. But making it approachable that way is a really, really important thing. Sometimes it gets to be daunting. And, a lot of customers, especially those that are, doing it on their own, without the help of, Kyndryl or Microsoft or whoever it is, they really struggle with these things. They really go down this path, and either they convince themselves that it's not worth doing, and then you have all the issues that that we've been talking about, or maybe even worse than that, they'll do something and it won't turn out the way they expect it to. There'll be a hidden cost, or something that just doesn't meet expectations down the road. So yeah, I think those are really, really critical parts of this that it's easy to gloss over sometimes.
That's great. So let me give you all a chance to give us a few parting words and give us your prediction for the future. I promise I'm not going to come back a year or two from now and hold you accountable. So just let's give us, what do you think the next step is? Where is this market moving? So let's start with you, Richard Baird.
I think the market is moving much more towards that steady state of how does the mainframe environment and the hyperscaler environment, whichever one it is, how do they truly come together? I think we'll see maybe some new technologies that evolve over the next couple of years to make it simpler and easier to go backwards and forwards. And I'm not necessarily talking about containerization or anything like that, but just something that brings those two environments much more closely together. There will be a shift as well in where today's applications actually end up running. You may see more applications, or some of the older applications, just because businesses are changing. They will be retired versus replatformed, and there'll be a new stand up in a hyperscaler environment. So I think there's a set of business changes which are coming, which will set the future, as will some technology changes around how applications and data get placed.
That's great. Graham, your turn. Final words, future, looking forward.
Yeah, the future is bright, I think. Some years ago, when I was working around IBM, there was a lot of talk about fit for purpose. And I think fit for purpose is almost something that's coming of age, where people are actually looking at what is the right place to run this application, and how do I run that application. So I think we will see the diversity of platforms. I think we'll see more applications move to the cloud. I think we'll see a lot of customers secure their applications on the mainframe. So I think, we'll see that world where people are actually choosing the right technology based on their actual needs. And I also see that what's going to happen with the applications is, now that everyone's recognizing the value of these applications, which for many organizations they've been trying to move away for the last 20 years, I think we'll see a lot more new innovation around those applications as companies look to extend those applications to make them grow into what they're doing. So I think the real next wave will be not moving applications to the cloud, but actually taking those applications and modernizing them to really be at home in the cloud and to really exploit the potential of the cloud.
I love that prediction, Graham, because it's not about the technology, it's about what you're doing with it. That's fantastic. Richard Gamblin, your predictions for the future?
Yeah, so I think my predictions for the future are the changes that we've seen over the last 3 to 5 years will accelerate. I think that's the big thing. The change that we've seen is not slowing down, it's accelerating and accelerating extremely fast. And I think a lot of the reason for that is the technologies that are available to us, the catalysts for change are increasing that much more quickly. I think specifically what we'll start to see, we've thought about the applications and the business logic being freed to be delivered in different and interesting ways. I think the other element to this is the data, the ability to take, the bulk of the highly structured, incredibly valuable data that sits in the mainframe today and exploit that in new and interesting ways. The ability to be able to have self-service access for digital channels, the ability to exploit that data. If you look at what's really bubbling in the industry around large language models, GPT-4, and the ability to combine, that rich source of data, that rich vein of data in ways that you couldn't imagine interrogating it before through analytics and orthogonal queries is really sweeping different kinds of thinking of what you can do with these services. And that's something that we're going to see massively in the next 6 to 12 months.
That's great. I think that leads naturally to Vince. Vince, your predictions for the future?
Yeah, no, I think, we think of it as kind of a three-dimensional thing. Certainly, as, several of us have pointed out, there's, a whole evolving set of, new business needs. There, new applications people want to build, new ways to think about whatever it is, AI or whatever it is. And, our legacy applications have to participate with that. Number two, there's a lot on the technology dimension as well. I think of the mainframe as something that's been kind of locked away from the rest of the IT universe for a long time. It's the way that mainframers do things, and it's generally different than the way other systems work. We're getting a lot of good traction when we talk about making the mainframe first-class citizen, making it easy to do the kinds of things that we're talking about, using the tools from all of the companies on the call here today, so that these things don't seem like big, impossible technical problems. They're just a matter of pick and choose what you want to use depending on what your requirements are. And then I think the final really important one is I'll call it perception. I've been around a long time, and 20 years ago, folks were talking about migrating applications off the mainframe, and when you spoke to folks who'd done that, generally you would hear horror stories. There weren't generally kind of accepted wisdom was that you could pick it up and be successful with that. People were just afraid of the risk and all the other things we talked about. I think that's changing too. I think seeing some of the the industry's biggest players, the Microsofts, the Googles, the, et cetera, standing behind some of these things and creating success stories, I think is, taking away from that. The mainframe's, a cool platform to build applications if that's what your skill set is, but it's not the only application and platform out there. And, certainly there are many, many good reasons to be looking at some of these alternatives. And the more that gets done, the more it becomes a self-fulfilling thing. So, I think perception, changing business needs, and and the technology supporting that is, as several of us have said, we see it as accelerating. I don't see anything that's going to slow that down in the immediate future.
And last not least, Avuday, your final comments, predictions for the future, whatever you would like to talk about.
Sure. Being the last, like we already get covered most of the points, but I would say that customer experience is key, and it will continue to be the key factor for businesses. And getting this unmatched customer experience will definitely be, it's going to rely strongly on cloud-based services like AI and data analytics. And again, we are moving from an era of making the right decisions to an era of making the right decisions at right time. So the timing becomes very critical. And mainframe being the business data-centric system, processing and handling this data in a better way through data analytics and making the business decision at the right time, that will be much more enabled through the cloud services. So I think there will be a strong movement towards data moving towards cloud and business taking it further for making decisions through other cloud services.
Well, those are great points, Avuday. So we've run out of time. We could clearly talk for days on this topic. And I wanted to say that, when we started this panel, I did expect some very different perspectives when you have a cloud provider and you have mainframe companies on the same conversation. You're expecting very different opinions. And it's surprising how much in agreement we all are. And it comes down to, should I stay or should I go? The answer is yes, it depends, all of the above. Mix and match, your journey is unique. And I think that we're all in agreement on that. Nod your heads yes if you agree. Yes. So we all agree on that. So it's a bright, beautiful new world. And the people listening, the organizations listening, obviously have a wealth of opportunities when it comes to finding help in charting your own journey. So gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. And I hope the audience has gotten as much out of this conversation as I have. Thank you.